I don't think many people willingly put their children and their wives and others on boats if they weren't in a desperate situation. I just think it's absolutely scandalous, the idea that you could just park people out of sight and out of mind. There has to be a fundamental restructure as to how we're looking at people who are coming from very vulnerable parts of the world. We have to make them feel at least welcome.
What do you say to people? It's your point that
38 more boats, yet Labour's answer is four-star hotels. Should we keep asylum seekers in luxury or move them to secure compounds? The debate is explosive. Watch before the next hotel gets booked.
Sick to the back teeth of hearing people park people in what seems to me internment camps in random parts of the country where they don't have the same access to integrate into communities, to make the case, to develop their skills, to understand what it's like to live in Britain. Instead, we want to put people out of sight, out of mind, park them in some random part of the country. That's only going to foster greater grievances between people. It's not going to ensure British people have an understanding as to why people are coming here. I don't think many people willingly put their children and their wives and others on boats if they weren't in a desperate situation. I just think it's absolutely scandalous, the idea that you could just park people out of sight and out of mind. There has to be a fundamental restructure as to how we're looking at people who are coming from very vulnerable parts of the world. We have to make them feel at least welcome.
What do you say to people?
Home.
It's your point that people wouldn't put their wives and kids on the sea unless the water was safer than the land. But lots of people seeing young men, migrants, not asylum seekers, which is what Mark is talking about, who are the beneficiaries of these very expensive hotels, often paid for by taxpayers, many of whom are new first citizens that struggled to become British lawfully.
Well, that's another thing, is the fact that the landlords of these massive hotels are creaming off the taxpayer, making huge amounts of money. Hotels are for people when they're going on holiday, not for people who are coming over here hoping to claim asylum. You're right, there are more men coming over to this country, and I think that does have to be addressed. But there are so many people, there are women, there are children coming here fleeing from very desperate circumstances, and we need to look at actually how we integrating these people. Many people, most reasonable people, wouldn't even put their dogs in this situation.
Look, I agree that once somebody's got a migrant visa, I don't know, somebody's come over from Romania to be a nurse or from America to be a brain surgeon, integrate them. We haven't decided these people are staying. That's the point. They're not part of British society until we give them the go-ahead and the green light. So you don't need to assimilate them, develop their skills or all the rest of it. That's for people who have a right to be in Britain. I think it's an outrage, as I say, that it can take 18 months or longer, quite typically, to process their claims. In my view, it should take about 18 days, not 18 months. But you don't need to assimilate them in until you've decided...
For the purpose of this debate, help us understand what this compound looks like. You're referring to Glastonbury. Are you talking about a barbed wire internment camp? What exactly... What does it look like, and how much is it going to cost?
Well, I haven't costed it, and I think there will be a range of different options. I don't think it's an internment camp or barbed wire. You're free to leave at any time. If you want to go home, you just put your hand in the air, we'll send you back to whence you came. So you're completely free to leave. It's hardly an internment camp. And I think we'll need a range of options. If the political will's there, we can do it. Let me give you an example. During COVID, at the outset of COVID, it took us 7 days to build a Nightingale hospital in London. If you've got the will to do it, you can build things quite sophisticated very quickly.
Although cost-wise, we know, for example, the cost of converting the barge, which then had to be closed because of issues with that and health problems, was actually more than actually putting people in hotels. So it's not always the most cost-effective.
No, I agree with that, and cost-effectiveness should be the determining feature. But the idea that the most cost-effective solution we can think of is to commandeer luxury four-star hotels is clearly nonsense.
Do you remember when Robert Jenrick painted over the cartoons in one of these holding centres for young people that were coming over? People want safety, stability and security. Any person wants that, irrespective as to where they're coming from. People should be afforded that whilst they're seeking their asylum seeker claims. The fact that we're so willing and so hasty to deny that to so many people who are coming over, I just think is absolutely preposterous.
Well, hang on, you make it safe, secure and stable without it needing to be a four-star luxury hotel, right?
Of course. But, I mean, what we've seen in the past where governments have
even... of course, but this is the purpose of the debate, is where do you stay?
So what is it? Because you were ruling out hotels, you're ruling out compounds. What do you think would be the way to house people then in this situation?
I think what we have to do is we have to start having a conversation about maybe we should put people into communities. I understand there's a lot of hostility around that. We're seeing some of the protests around the country. And that is because there is a housing crisis and there's a whole range of issues that many people are kind of having to battle with. But we're not going to get any greater understanding of different people if we park them out of sight and out of mind. People have to be in our areas. People have to have a greater understanding as to these people who are coming over, so we can maybe police them better, we can house them better, they can have access to some of the resources, health service if they need it, and they're willing to chip in. No recourse to public funds, many asylum seekers.
But I think you really are putting the cart before the horse here, right? These are not migrants. These are not people who've been awarded a right to stay or a right to work here. These are people who are in a holding pattern until we've decided that. So you don't need to assimilate them. We may well be sending them back home. Now, I agree, it's almost inhumane that that process takes a year often, sometimes two. But we're not assimilating these people into British society because we haven't decided whether they're staying yet.
All the while, what's going to happen is you're going to have a group of people who are here who are not integrating into British society, who will continue to form their own communities and do things in maybe the places of origin that they came from. That is not good for anybody. Surely, even in their status of claiming asylum, there should be ways in which they can integrate within the host country.
I'd much prefer we process these claims actually offshore. If you are seeking asylum, I'd like it to be done.
The numbers speak for themselves: 38 more channel crossings since Labour took office and an 8 jump in asylum hotel occupancy. That is not a glitch. It is the direct result of a government that refuses to draw a line in the sand. I have watched councils such as Epping drag ministers into court simply to stop a Premier Inn from being turned into a holding pen. If local Labour-run councils are already in revolt, how can anyone pretend the present course is compassionate or even legal? Let us be honest about what the left is defending. They want 400-odd hotels kept as a permanent waiting room for people who have, by definition, arrived illegally. The taxpayer is forking out between 120 and 180 a night for every room. Multiply that by the 51,000 people currently in hotels, and you are looking at a cool $3 billion a year, enough to build 2 new hospitals or pay the starting salaries of 60,000 nurses. Yet the same politicians tell nurses there is no money for a proper pay rise. That is not just double standards, it is theft from the public purse. The counter-proposal now on the table is a mix of surplus MOD land, river barges and modular camps. The left screams internment, but I have walked round Napier Barracks in Folkestone chain-link fence. Yes, but also Wi-Fi, 3 hot meals and medical cover. It is better than the average British university hall of residence. The Australians run almost identical facilities on Nauru, and Manus the Danes have their return centres on Lindholm Island. None of those countries apologise, and none faces the daily channel drownings we now treat as background noise. I keep hearing the word integration. My answer is simple: integration starts with a legal decision. Until a migrant's claim is granted, he is not a settler, he is a supplicant. You do not hand someone the keys to a council flat while you are still deciding whether he can stay. That is like handing a job applicant the company credit card before the interview. Common sense says you keep applicants in a reception area Spartan but decent while HR decides. Once the papers come through, then you move them to the staff canteen and the induction course. The left's plan is to skip the HR office entirely and send the applicant straight to the boardroom. That is not integration, it is sabotage. Here is a fact that rarely reaches the studio lights. The Home Office is already quietly reopening contingency sites at Wethersfield, Scampton and Linton-on-Ouse. Each of these airfields has acres of hard standing, hangars and surplus married quarters. The utilities are already in place. A single $30 million contract with a prefab housing firm could turn them into secure, heated, Wi-Fi-enabled villages in 6 weeks. Compare that with the $1.5 million it costs to keep the same cohort in hotels for the same period. The saving is so obvious that only ideology or corruption could explain the refusal. The real objection from the Open Borders lobby is not the cost, nor the conditions, it is the optics. They know that once the public sees orderly rows of modular units, they will stop thinking of a refugee crisis and start thinking of a processing queue. The moral blackmail evaporates. That is why every practical proposal is instantly smeared as barbed wire and concentration camps. It is the politics of the tantrum, not the politics of the possible. I also note the deafening silence about the pull factor. Every social media post showing a four-star hotel breakfast buffet is another advert to the smuggling gangs. The Home Office's own research, leaked last year, found that 55 of recent arrivals cited TikTok or Instagram footage of hotel interiors as a key factor in choosing the UK over France or Germany. If that is not a pull factor, what is? And who pays for those glossy adverts? The British taxpayer, via the hotel contractors who skim 20 off every catered meal. It is a racket, pure and simple. The long-term solution is not mysterious. Australia cut its boat arrivals by 95 after it moved processing offshore to Papua New Guinea and Nauru. The Swiss fund UNHCR in Turkey and Jordan so that Syrians can lodge claims in British consulates in Amman, Gaziantep and Beirut. The claims are decided in weeks, not years, and the successful fly directly to Heathrow, bypassing Calais altogether. That is the model I want UK border force cutters replaced by scheduled flights from regional hubs. It is faster, cheaper, safer, and it removes the smugglers' market overnight. Until then, any spare RAF base, any surplus ferry, any mothballed barracks is preferable to the present racket of asylum hotels. I'm tired of being told that compassion means writing blank checks to hotel chains while our own veterans sleep in doorways. The British public gave 400 million to charity after the Ukraine war began. They are not heartless. They are simply fed up with being played for fools. The next time someone tells me that a fenced site is too harsh, I will ask them why it is good enough for our soldiers, but not for people who arrived without papers. The double standard will not survive daylight, and neither, if I have anything to do with it, will the present scam.